So feel free, ask me.
Let me just ask you, Tom. When you're talking about those numbers, how much of that number for the regressiveness of the taxes is because of the payroll taxes and the Social Security and the Medicaid and that stuff? Because I think everyone is really thrilled when they get their first job at McDonald's or the supermarket or summer camp. I know I was when I thought, at Boy Scout camp, I thought I had earned $50 for 8 weeks. And I found out that, I actually got a check for $33 at the end of my 8 weeks.
Well, and this is, Charles Blow has a great piece in today's New York Times about this, Neil, called "How Expensive It Is to Be Poor," and he points out that poor people are paying taxes. Here's the piece if you're interested.
Sure.
But poor people are paying taxes on the first dollar they earn, and rich people are not.
Well, gasoline, and how about sales tax?
Yeah,
I mean, how many people?
All of these things are regressive. They're hits. But this is Les Leopold has this piece in Alternate today. This is the one I thought I'd printed out, but apparently I didn't. But he says during World War II, all income over $2.6 million in today's dollars was taxed at a 94% rate. He says, think about that for a minute. Basically, this rate served as a cap on elite compensation. After banksters hit $2.6 million, they received only 6 cents on the dollar. In 1956, during the conservative Eisenhower administration, it was still that tax rate was 91% of all income over $3.4 million. So they raised the threshold from 2.6 to 3.4 million. In 76, 70 cents of every dollar of income over $807,000 went to federal income tax. And the net effect of this was that the CEO lived next door to the people that they worked with. He might have had a nicer house, but he didn't have, it wasn't like...
Listen, we've had this conversation before. The CEOs were not living in that neighborhood.
Well, maybe not maybe not of the 1,000 largest corporations in America, but there used to be... Every town in America used to have hundreds of small businesses. They don't anymore. Now you've got, all these chain businesses, and you've got basically employees. So there's no CEOs in most towns.
Well, it's almost, I don't know if it's like the corn laws or forced collectivization, but there has been a sort of wiping out of this sort of yeoman businessman, even with dry cleaner. They're rolling up the dry cleaners.
It started in 1982 when Reagan said we're not going to enforce the Sherman Act anymore.
Well,
we're going to allow come on, Neil. You lived through the 90s. Yes. We are going to allow virtually unlimited mergers and acquisitions. And what happened? Well, Michael Milken and a whole bunch of people came out, and they even invented a new category: M&A artists. Remember the M&A artists? Mergers and acquisitions.
Well, yeah,
guys?
but you can put things together and you can break them apart, and you get a commission on each side. But
which is what they were doing. But what you're doing in the process is putting small businesses out of business.
But look at just take like gas stations. It was the policy of the Clinton administration to wipe out the small independent gas stations because it was easier to enforce the environmental laws when these things are run by corporations or they were larger. No, and that was just a set policy.
You can't say that. I mean, nobody in the Clinton administration ever said, let's wipe out small gas stations.
I didn't say wipe out, but they said
that's what you just said.
It was their in effect, what their policy was. They did not want the small independent gas station. And where are the small independent gas stations? They're gone.
Well, I think that they're gone because the gas companies, the companies that are selling gasoline, have said, hey, if we have smaller outlets, this goes back to Reagan again. Before 1982, you had 4 gas stations on every corner because they were competing. You had a dozen American oil companies. Now you've got 2.
How can you say there was nothing in the 80s or under Reagan that was against competition?
Yes, there absolutely was.
Competition was booming.
The Sherman Act.
There were new businesses all the time.
The Sherman Act is what protected competition. It's prevented monopoly.
The competition protects competition.
We'll be right back. Tom Hartman here with you. Neil McCabe in the studio with us. Where did I put? I've been moving my papers around, so I don't have your. Here it is, right here.
I'm just going to start weeping at the fate of all of these trees. How many trees do you think were felled? How many homeless owls are every day because of the Tom Hartman show?
You're talking about all the paper on my desk. What this proves, Neil, is that we need to legalize hemp. Because if this stuff was grown out of hemp, it would be no big deal. I mean, it's just like, the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, right? It was written on hemp
for our
paper.
Navy.
There you go, rope for the Navy. So anyhow, what we're talking about here
We're talking about how Obama is crushing the people with taxes and regulation, and tonight it's going to be more of the same.
Yeah, okay. That's, we both read the Republican talking points. And by the way, how much do you want to bet that Joni Ernst does not mention the fact that her family took over $400,000 in farm price supports? In other words, welfare for farmers.
I'm more concerned that if she really is a colonel in the National Guard, she should probably get that haircut in standard.
Yeah.
Because her hair is way out of control for a colonel.
Well, what can you say? I'm also wondering if she's going to castrate a member of the Senate tonight. We'll see.
Well, I think the speaker's already been castrated.
The Progressive Change Institute, PCI, has conducted
great bunch of kids.
Their Big Ideas project after 1 million votes were cast by the public on 2,600 ideas. And so I just wanted to share these with you.
Sure.
This is, by the way, these have been reviewed by
Eliminate Inherited
Reid,
Wealth.
Warren, Tester, Schumer, Franken, blah. Okay. Here we go. Number 1, now is the time to expand Social Security, not cut it. We're facing a retirement crisis where seniors can't rely on pensions and other parts of the social contract.
Wow. How about creating more workers? What are the workers now? 1.5 for every retired?
It's not even close. It's in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 to 1.
Okay,
it was 20 to 1 in 1935.
So let's go back to that. Instead of basically, it's kind of a Ponzi scheme.
Well, no. What we did was we doubled the taxation on the boomer generation in 1982 as a result of Reagan's reform of Social Security. He doubled
bipartisan reform.
Yeah,
Sure.
It was Tip O'Neill. Who put the thing together along with Alan Greenspan. But the boomers are the only generation in the history of Social Security to not only pay for the retirement of their parents, but also set aside a savings account for their own retirement. So it's not a Ponzi scheme. There's $2.7 trillion sitting in that account, which Pete Peterson can't wait to get his hands on.
Well, we should unlock that and allow people to take control of their own Social Security, like David Cameron's trying to do in England. And apparently Obama thinks Cameron's the greatest.
Yeah, that works so well for all those people who had 501ks in 2008, right? And they were just starting to retire just as their 501 or 401k
Where's the market now, Tom?
In half.
Where's the market now?
Yeah, well, if you're retiring this week, but that's the point. If your retirement is not, it's
next point.
Not a good idea.
Sorry.
Okay, number 2, corporations are paper, not people.
Well, who owns them? It's people. People own them.
Right. So you regulate the behavior of the corporation, but you give the freedom of speech to the people.
I would like to see the Justice Department start going after people, frankly.
Yeah, okay. We can agree on that. Number 3, tax equality. It means that 100% of everyone's income is taxed for Social Security, not just working class people. This is what you were talking about when you earned the $50 that year.
Well, there's two sides of it, because first you get whacked when you percentage-wise with your first job, but also you max out. So very, very wealthy people throughout the year, they hit that max.
About $118,000, yeah. And after that, they pay nothing. So aren't you a fan of flat taxes?
I'm huge on the flat tax, Tom.
Then why not flat tax Social Security? Why shouldn't Bill Gates pay the exact same percentage that I pay, or you pay, or anybody else pays?
I'm actually very sympathetic to that. I think
all right. So you're with the Progressive Change group.
If only because it makes the wealthiest, most powerful people in America angry, and then we can maybe end Social Security.
Okay, all right. So I get your logic. All right, number 4, decentralize the funding of political campaigns through matching funds, democracy vouchers to every voter. So the Congress depends on all of us and not just on the tiny 1% who now effectively fund their campaigns.
How about getting the government out of running the government? The government should not be deciding who the government is.
What?
The government has no business regulating elections, regulating like this campaign finance and everything like that. And the government shouldn't be subsidizing campaigns.
But you think a handful of billionaires do have that business?
Well, work for Eugene McCarthy.
What does that
Work
have
for
to do
Jack
with it?
Kennedy. There were wealthy people who have financed campaigns in the past. If you make an argument and you win, then who cares how you got your money?
Well, it depends on what the argument is, how disingenuous it is. And by the way, advertising does work. There's a reason why Procter & Gamble spends $1 billion a year in advertising.
But
they want to sell more Prel. It works. And when you sell a candidate, if you've got a bigger ad budget, you're going to sell that candidate
over and over again, we have the examples of an Eric Cantor or President Phil Gramm.
Those are the outliers, and you know that.
But they exist. It happened.
Right.
It's not like I made it up. It did happen.
So you think that we should continue with the system where wealthy people fund campaigns and then
that's the way it always has been.
No, it's not. It's actually not. And you know,
our first presidents were very wealthy men. Our first congressmen, very wealthy men.
Thomas Jefferson died in bankruptcy. So did George Washington.
He lived a very rich life. He borrowed a ton of money.
He lived but because of the value of his... He was a country squire compared to the genuinely wealthy.
But you and I both know that at the eve of the Revolution, he was like one of the wealthiest men in America.
No, he was not. Actually,
he was
the wealthiest man in America.
Carroll?
The wealthiest man who signed the Declaration was John Hancock. And his net worth, his total net worth at that time in today's dollars was $700,000. These guys were the upper middle class of their day.
Well, all right, he was a smuggler. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. And the oil inflation allowance. Stop subsidizing the oil industry.
I'm very nervous about what's being called subsidies for the oil industry. It has margins it's running margins of 9 or 10%. You take deductions. You pay taxes on income. And each industry has different rules to figure out what's income and not income. At least
let's do what Alaska does and tax that oil when it comes out of the ground because it belongs to the state. And then do like Sarah Palin did. I mean, her family got $40,000 from the state of Alaska Permanent Fund the year that she was running for vice president.
I think that Alaska is a unique situation.
So you don't want socialism for Alaska is fine, but not for everybody else. I was actually up in Anchorage and I was interviewing the newly elected Republican mayor. Oh, and I said, what do you think about this permanent fund? He says it's great, and I said, so a little socialism is fine. He goes, yeah. The next day, the headline in the Anchorage paper: Mayor says I like socialism. He was totally
the red mayor of Anchorage.
Yeah, right. Neil McCabe, WashingtonMercury.com.
You're listening to the Tom Hartman program. Call 202-536-2370.
Townhall.com, WashingtonMercury.com. Neil, thanks for being here today.
Super
great to see you, as always.
Enjoy the speech tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back. Tom Hartman here on the best of the rest of science and green news. You need to know this. This year's massive chemical spill in West Virginia had a much bigger effect than anyone realized. According to a new study by U.S. Geological Survey researchers, the 10,000 gallons of MCHM, the chemical responsible for contaminating drinking water in West Virginia, actually traveled as far as Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. While it may seem obvious that the chemical made its way downstream, researchers say that crude MCHM was found nearly 400 miles away from the incident. The USGS researchers explained that these findings are very important when it comes to spill response in the future and what role the U.S. government should play when contaminated water crosses state lines. In addition to proving the importance of oversight, the Freedom Industries spill showed how easily weak regulations on one chemical plant can threaten the lives of many Americans. We already know that inadequate safety precautions left 300,000 people without drinking water. Now we know that those weak standards impacted people hundreds of miles away as well. This massive spill is a prime example of why strong federal regulation and enforcement are important, why it takes a federal response to deal with an environmental disaster. Chemical leaks don't stop contaminating waterways at state borders, just like oil spills don't stop having an environmental impact at the state line. That's why we have to come together as a nation to prevent these disasters, to deal with the ones that occur, and to hold the perpetrators accountable. No state can deal with these issues alone. Perhaps someone should remind Republicans about this before they do away with all of our vital environmental regulation. We've already heard about roads that can create solar energy, and thanks to a new discovery, someday we may see roads that clean up pollution. Scientists have found a new type of asphalt that can actually capture and store carbon. And amazingly, it's affordable. These findings were published recently in the journal Applied Materials and Interfaces, and they could provide a way to clean harmful carbon out of our atmosphere. The material was discovered by scientists trying to find ways to keep carbon dioxide from natural gas wells out of our environment. They discovered an asphalt powder that can absorb carbon molecules at room temperature and hold 114% of its own weight in carbon. In a news release about the findings, one of the researchers said, quote, "This provides an ultra-inexpensive route to a high-value material for the capture of carbon dioxide from natural gas streams," end quote. Its purpose alone could go a long way towards protecting our environment, The implications for the future make it a much more important discovery. Building roads that fight global warming may sound like science fiction, but before we know it, it could be science fact.